In the book of Revelation, chapter 12 says that we have defeated the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. My mission is to share the stories of how the people around us have encountered God, gone through a trial, or been born again, in the hope that you would be encouraged and your heart would be stirred for Jesus Christ.
My name is Serena. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, but I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now.
Were you born in Rochester?
I was born in Rochester. Okay, so actually, fun fact, rewind. I wanted to live in North Carolina since I was 5. And people ask me why. I'm like, oh, it's warm, it's pretty. But it's because I know this is where God's wanted me to be my whole life, which is crazy to say, but I obviously didn't know that until living here this time. This is my second time living in Charlotte. But growing up, we weren't religious. We didn't go to church. We never did prayers. We didn't go to, nothing. I mean, my mom loves to say that we were Catholic, but I'm like, where? Where were we Catholic? I don't know. So whatever, sure. Guess we were that, but again, it was not there. And my grandpa, he would read me Bible stories sometimes. We would watch movies. I think I watched the 10 Commandments or something before when I was little, young. But I just never identify it as anything because it just wasn't a part of my life. Growing up, didn't have the best childhood by my own personal definition and means. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family, drug use from extended family members, abuse from my father to my mother, and just verbal, emotional, physical, all that. So just growing up, I just felt always very different from my family. I didn't know why. I just kind of felt like I didn't really fit in with them. In 6th grade, a bunch of my close friends and my little boyfriend and all that fun stuff, they made I Hate Serena Club. So that I think was just a very core memory that left me really just confused as to why that was happening. I just started to feel really sad and anxious, and not so much a loner, but just wanting validation from other people to accept me. And in high school, right after 9th grade, or it's actually 2 months into 9th grade, there was a girl in our class named Tamron, rest in peace, but she ended up committing suicide 2 months into our freshman year of high school, and I was one of the first people to find out about it. Not because I was really good friends with her, but because there was a guy that I knew that worked as a volunteer fire department or whatever, and he was a little bit older than me. I think he was a junior or something when I started. So, but we were friends because we rode the same bus. And he texted me that evening, called me, blowing up my phone because he thought it was me. So we found that out, and everyone in the school was super devastated because what the heck, and it was from bullying. All this stuff happened. Her Tumblr got exposed, I guess, per se. And that was a time when Tumblr was really popular, and so of course we all looked at it to see what she was posting, and then I started looking at it, and I started resonating with all the stuff that she was saying. And later on that, I think it was I'm pretty sure it was later that same year, but just I think it was February of that year, I tried to take my own life. And I left a letter to people, a couple of different letters. I sent a text message to one of my friends, and luckily I'm alive. With the amount of pills I took, I probably should not have been. But then I started seeing my school guidance counselor, and one of the things that she's told me that's always stuck with me is when you look at dark, all you're gonna see is dark. So you can't keep looking at this dark stuff. And so I tried to remove Tumblr from myself, because before I had tried to commit suicide, I was harming myself. But that wasn't enough for me. I just was still feeling all this pain, which is what led me to trying to take it a step further. Because I felt all of these emotions and I didn't know what to do with them, letting them out by hurting myself physically, as well as making myself suffer by looking at all this stuff on Tumblr, just seemed the more reasonable and logical option for me at the time. I kind of started acting out a little bit, I would say. I started drinking at a young age. There was just this hole inside of me, and so between that and like college, I just tried to fill the hole with drinking and partying and sometimes smoking. And then I get to college and I'm still experiencing obviously all these same feelings that I'd already been dealing with for the last however many years. And I did get bullied in college first year. A lot of it was my own volition. They were bullying me for the behaviors that I was emulating at parties and things like that. Just kept filling myself with the same things. And actually sophomore year of college, there was a girl named Jenna who lived next door to me, and she invited me to Bible study. So I would go to Bible studies with her on Thursday nights. I was just confused because it all sounded great to me, but I didn't understand it. And I couldn't grasp the concept of like who this Jesus person was and like, why would he accept me? Why would he love me? Because I feel like up until that point in my life, like God was never really talked about. It was never mentioned. Like it was just there. And so then she invited me to a few youth nights. I went again. I just felt really out of place. I didn't understand it. I'm like, what is with this music? Like, what is going on? Where are we? I got my first Bible, got like a little pink King James Bible, and I was bringing it to Bible study, but like the girls that I was with, they would sit there and read it, and I'm just like, how are you getting that out of this? Because this says thou art da 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 da, and I don't know what that means. Like, I don't understand this. Very shortly after that, it was Halloween. Actually, October 28th, 2016 was a Halloween party. And I had went because college and again, still doing all the same things. And I had met somebody that evening. And at that time, this person, it just was kind of like, I don't know what it was supposed to be, but it ended up turning into him being my abuser, like very shortly after that. And it was very much like, it wasn't love bomb. It was straight just like abuse. And looking back on it now, like I know that Satan sent that person into my life to spiritually kill me at the time because I was just finding my faith, like literally right after I had gotten introduced for the first time. It's like, no, sorry, like that's not gonna happen for her. And I won't admit, like he succeeded for a short amount of time. Because that next 4 years of my life, so mostly my entire college experience, it was just a lot of emotional and verbal abuse, which now kind of telling this story, I'm like realizing that is the more like impactful one, at least for me, because already being a deeply emotional person is like, And it was just so crazy because I always swore to myself, like after watching my mom and my dad, like I will never get into that kind of situation. Like if I see this, like I'm gonna leave. But when it's emotional and physical, emotional and mental, like you don't see it right away. And you're kind of, once you realize it, you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm stuck. Like I'm already in this situation. And so I actually moved to Charlotte to try to, one, I always wanted to live here, but two, I was trying to escape from the abusive situation. Because we went to college together, but he also lived in Atlanta, and Charlotte is only 4 hours from Atlanta. So even though I was down here, and my logic at the time was, well, if I just find a different guy to date, I'll get over this one, it'll be no problem. Made it a lot harder, actually, and that was just when like stuff kind of started to escalate. And I just kind of became this person that I never wanted to be, especially towards the beginning of 2020, like near COVID. I just started to say things I never would have said. And once I realized that like, okay, this is not who you are, like something has to happen. And it was like to the point where like I lied about checking myself in a mental institution just to try to get away from him. But like nothing I was saying, nothing I was doing would let me get away from him. And there was times in that situation like where God had started to use the month of February to like be really significant for me. So again, I tried to end my life in high school in February. And in February of 2020, I go down to Atlanta. I see this person. we're arguing because this time he had found out all this other stuff about me. I found out all this other stuff about him. We're arguing. He had put his hands on me, like, most physically that first time. There were a few other times, but that was like the time where I was like, okay, no, like, this is kind of drawing the line, because I was bleeding on my chest, and I was like, okay, I have to leave. But then he had convinced me to stay, and we went out drinking that night, and we never drank together before, like, ever. So we went out drinking that night. We had a good time, I guess, for you can call it that. And we got back, and he started to have an asthma attack because we started arguing about what, I don't even remember. But he was having an asthma attack. But I had ordered Uber Eats. Like, the Uber Eats was like, oh, we're here. And I also had to call the ambulance. I had to call 911 to get the ambulance to come because I thought he was going to die from his asthma attack. As I'm going out front to let the ambulance in to the Airbnb, Uber Eats shows up, and the police also show up because our neighbors called the police on us because they heard us arguing. So everyone comes in, they're questioning us. I get the food, the ambulance checks him out, he's fine. He ends up falling asleep, like, very shortly afterwards. I ate my food. I went through his phone, I deleted everything, blocked my number. I packed my stuff up at 3 o'clock in the morning and got in my car and started driving. And I was to the point where I should not have been driving at all. But somehow, by the grace of God, I made it just over the South Carolina border, and I pulled over and I went to bed for like 3 hours because I was like, I can't keep driving or I will crash. So that didn't end that situation, though. Unfortunately, I thought it was going to. But somehow he got back into contact with me, even though numbers were blocked on both sides. So I still don't understand how he got in contact with me. But I didn't get the courage to end that situation until June of 2020. And it was in May of 2020 where I started reading The Power of I Am by Joel Osteen. And that was kind of like, I guess, my first introduction and step back into God. And I started watching Elevation Church because I lived here in Charlotte and I had heard about it. And I just got the strength from God to leave that situation on June 10th of 2020. Just had to block him and never speak to him again.
What had your relationship with God looked like? What did it look like throughout all of this? Like, all of this situation, because you're still, like, growing in your faith, and then did that just kind of, like, put a halt to it? Was it, like, kind of generally there?
It just wasn't there. Like, it was introduced, but then it was not there. And it was a lot of horoscopes, zodiac signs, manifestation. I feel like God was there, like, oh yeah, there's a God, like, of the universe, like, blah, 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 blah. But it was more so, like, God mixed with everything else and not, like, just God. And Jesus was not, like, I knew who he was, like, I had a cross, like, you know, but I didn't know who he was, if that makes sense. But, like, I didn't pray, I didn't read my Bible, I didn't go to church, like, nothing. I was just lost. Until that time, I started reading the book, watching Elevation sermons, but again, I still wasn't getting it. I wasn't reading the Bible for myself. I wasn't going to church. And after that abuse, like, it was very easy for me to fall into the trap of everything else of, okay, you need to be better, you need to grow, you need to develop yourself. It was almost like a lot of self-righteousness, I would say. Like, yeah, I believe in God and he's gonna do all these great things for me, but it was like a self-serving kind of relationship. 2021 comes around and my lease here in Charlotte was up, or gonna be up, and I was deciding on whether I wanted to go back to New York or stay here. And I really, really wanted to stay here, but jobs were not really hiring because of COVID. I was like, dang, do I go home to New York or do I stay here? And I didn't want to go home to New York because I felt like a failure. I was like, I failed, I suck, like, I'm the worst. Then I heard a voice in my head, and obviously now I know at the time it was God, but I heard a voice in my head that wasn't mine say, like, you need to go home and heal. And I was like, that's weird. Like, okay, sure. And so I ended up, like, applying for a few jobs at some gyms in New York, which I gained a lot of weight during the relationship that I was in. It was a lot of, like, sleep deprivation, weight gain, like, it was just a lot of different things going on and a lot of negative side effects. And the depression worsened, and the self-harm worsened, and the suicidal thoughts worsened, and the anxiety worsened, and the negative self-talk, like you name it, every negative thing I was experiencing. So it all just got worse. I started to apply for jobs in gyms because I was really adamant about just like bettering myself, and I wanted to grow, and I had lost a bunch of weight after the relationship, and I thought like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like if I can do this and help like lose all this weight, I can help other people do the same thing. So fitness kind of in a way like became my ministry, but at the time I didn't know that that's what it was. I just thought, okay, cool, I think I'm good at this. But I was like, I have to go to Elevation in person at least one time before I leave, because it's right here in my backyard, like I have to go. This was February 21st or 24th, one of the two. And I go to Elevation Valentine, but unfortunately Pastor Stephen wasn't preaching live that day, but he was live streaming the service, and he preached a message called What You Call Small. And the reason why I remember that message is because he had stopped in the middle of it and closed his eyes, and he was like, oh, it'd be really good if I could know your name right now. Like, I know, you know, you're dealing with this and you think it's small, but it's not, and God sees you and he knows you. And he was like, and then he stopped and he was like, I just want to say that if you're flirting with the idea of suicide, like, you can't die. Like, you need to stand up, you need to decide to live, you need to decide to fight. Like, if you don't, the same spirit that tormented you is just going to be passed along. And I started bawling my eyes out because the night before I was also, again, having suicidal thoughts and thinking about maybe I should make a plan to try again and succeed this time. So I was like, wow, like, God is real. Like, he must be real. How did he know that? Like, I don't know Pastor Stephen. Like, so I was just like, whoa. So that was that. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going back to New York. And my dad let me move in with him. I go back to New York. I didn't really know. I was just like, okay, well, I'm here, I guess. And sidebar, I was seeing somebody else and he was living in New York. And I was like, well, this is also a great time for me to come back to New York, like, blah, blah. Well, I met not a woman, I met a girl named Allie. She's my bestie. She worked at one of the gyms that I worked at. And she like had just gotten saved, like, I don't know, not even a month before I started working there. And we just became friends, we connected, she was inviting me to church, all these other things. I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. So I'll go with her sometimes, but then I got, the guy and I had broke up that I was seeing, go figure, right? I started working at a bar, because I was like, well, I'm gonna fill my time with something else. So I started working at a bar, and I stopped going to church with Allie on Sundays because I had to work on Sundays. I like to work on the weekends, make the extra money. And Allie was very persistent, like consistent, like always just still inviting me. Even if I said no, like she was still inviting me. We would have conversations about it. And she was just like, just seeing her glow and like her joy, like all these things, it was just so sweet. And just seeing the way that she talked about God and Jesus and all those things, like it's just something that I kind of like wanted for myself, but I didn't know how to get there. And so throughout 2021, I was still kind of doing the same things, like drinking and I was smoking a lot, actually, at this point. I picked that up, and partying, not partying as much because it's Rochester, but I would go out after work with the people I worked with at the bar. And I got to this point where I got just really depressed and I didn't want to get out of bed anymore. I didn't even want to go to the gym anymore. And I was like, this is not right, because the gym is something I love. And I had like my car got totaled at the same time, and my ex came back, not the abusive ex, but my ex from New York came back around, and my cyst ruptured on my ovary all at the same time. And that just sent me like into a really big downward spiral. 2022 comes around. I had started to focus more on myself. I like wasn't drinking, I wasn't dating, I wasn't smoking. Like I was just me. Like I'm like, okay, this is the year that I'm gonna get myself together. And I was like, I'm gonna do that for 90 days. I'm gonna see how it goes, and whatever. And then it was going great, honestly. Like the 90 days were going awesome. I was super happy. I lost a bunch of weight. Like work was good. Like life was just good at that point. I had great friends. I was making good money. Like things are going awesome. And then my friend Allie, invited me to a church event one night, and I was on my way back from a gym that was about an hour and a half away from where we lived, and my other friend Maddie, and Allie just invited me, and I was like, oh, I don't know, like I might go, I'm not really sure. She was like, no, please come, and I was like, all right, like I'll have Maddie drop me off on the way home, but like, can you bring me back to my house later that evening? She's like, yeah, I'll bring you home. So she drops me off. And it's like the most sketchiest, like random church building. Like we were driving, I'm like, where are we? And I was like texting Allie, like, are you trying to kill me? Like, what's going on? And so I get dropped off in the parking lot. I put my stuff in Allie's car, and she's like, Serena, oh my gosh, I just met this woman. She's telling me all about all this stuff. Like, she's talking to me about my family problems. Like, what's been going on with my family? And I'm just like, whoa, Allie, like, chill out. Like, it's not that serious. And I'm like, okay. She's like, keep an open mind. I'm like, all right, fine. I'll keep an open mind. And we go in, and I meet the same girl. Her name is Genesis, actually. So looking back on it, I think it's really sweet because, like, that's the beginning of creation. Like, this is my little beginning of creation. But anyways, she starts talking to me, asking me, what is my relationship with God like? What is my relationship with Jesus like? Blah, blah, blah. And I honestly was like, I don't know. Like, I'm like, I'm trying to get there, but I don't know how to get there. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I want it, but I just don't know. Like, I just don't know. And so, again, at the time, like, it was called Carry the Love movement by circuit riders. They go around and minister, like, across different college campuses and stuff. And to this day, I wish I could I'm, like, trying to get in touch with her so I can tell her this amazing story. But, like, she asked me these questions, and again, like, they're having worship, all these things. At the time, I was just like, okay, like, get to the point, like, get to the message, like, I don't know. Still just very unsure. And she, like, looks at me because she had asked me what I did for work. She was like, yeah, God wants me to tell you that you need to leave your bartending job. And I was like, I just gave her, like, a look. And she was like, I'm not saying quit tomorrow, but, like, you need to start preparing because it's time for you to leave. And I was like, okay. But in my head, I'm like, this girl's crazy because I'm making a lot of money. Like, why would I leave? But at the time, I was also working on doing more content creation stuff, more influencing stuff, like trying to transition my money to online. That way I could work from anywhere. So that was, like, going on the side. So, but I was just like, brush it off. Like, no big deal. And so then later, after this service was, like, over, she was like, hey, come here. Like, I would like to talk to you. So I'm like, okay. So we go to the side. She has me do this exercise of 4 R's, like repent, release. I don't know what the other 2 are, honestly. But she was just like, I need you to, like, forgive these people. And I just want you to repeat after me. And I'm like, okay. But I'm like, whatever. So I'm going along with it. And she's like, okay, I forgive. And then I would repeat, like, I forgive. And then she would stop and I would insert the person's name. And then she literally proceeded, like, after that, like, to say, like, okay, I forgive them for blah, 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 blah. And it was exactly how each person had hurt me in very particular ways. And it's not, like I said, all men. Like, I said one of my girl best friends and my abusive ex, like I said, multiple different people. So it's not like she made a generalization. And so I'm just sitting there, like, bawling my eyes out because I'm like, how could she know this about me? Like, how does she know that this person hurt me that way and this person hurt me that way? Like, doesn't make sense. And in that moment, like, I just felt like this weight kind of being lifted off my shoulders. And I can only describe it as, like, Jesus, like, giving me a hug. Like, that's what it felt like. And to this day, I've never felt Jesus more tangibly than I have in that day. I was just like, whoa, like, what's going on? And I don't know, it was so strange, but I liked it. And shortly after that was February 24th of 2022. And so again, in February. At the time, I was making plans to move to Spain in September of 2022 to teach English and study Spanish. Also, probably just trying to run away from my life that I had in Rochester. It was March now, and I'm driving to work, and I'm sitting there like, wow, like, life is so good. I love my friends. I love my job. Like, I have a better relationship with my family members now. Like, life is just so good. Like, I'm happy. And I heard that again, that same voice that told me like, you have to go home, you need to heal. That same voice said to me, your work here is done, you can go. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to Spain. Like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, of course. So I was just really confused at that. So then the next day I woke up and I was really missing Charlotte. And it was like that missing where like, I want to be there kind of missing, not just like, oh yeah, like I want to go visit. It was like, oh, this is where you kind of need to be. It was like that string just being tugged on my heart. I was having trouble deciding, okay, well, do I go back to Charlotte now because I miss it so much, or do I go to Spain? And my friend DeAndre was like, just pick one. You can always do the other one later if you don't like it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So we went through this whole little exercise, and I ended up telling him that I thought about Charlotte a lot more than I thought about Spain. He was like, well, there's your answer. I was like, okay, I'm going to Charlotte. So my lease was up in June of 2022, and it was March. So I was like, okay, I've got some time to kind of realistically figure out how I'm gonna get back to Charlotte. And as soon as I made that decision to move to Charlotte, the next day, a girl that I had known from previously living here posted that she had an apartment for rent on Facebook. And I was like, this kind of seems like a good opportunity. That way I don't have to get approved by like a company and yada, yada, yada. So I messaged her and she was like, yeah, like totally, blah, blah, blah. We want to have you move in May. And I was like, I don't really know. Can I just pay May's rent and move in June? I don't want to pay double rent. But I was like, it's fine. And so she was like, okay, I need the security deposit because I have some people that are trying to look at the apartment tomorrow. So I was like, okay. So I go to this little box that I had with cash saved up in it because I was planning to take a trip to Boston. I opened the box. I had $1,900 or something dollars, which is the exact amount I needed for the security deposit. And I was like, ooh, it's a little too coincidental. And then I heard that same voice say, put the money down. And I was like, okay. So I put the money in my bank, I sent her a Venmo, I secured the apartment. So I'm like, great, like now I'm moving to Charlotte in May and I don't have a job, but like, it's fine, I'll figure it out. I also knew that me moving back to Charlotte was, if I move back to Charlotte, I'm going to have to do things the right way. Like we're not doing what we did before. If you move back to Charlotte, like you need to be intentional about it. You need to make the right decisions. You need to find a church. You need to start going to church, like, and you're not allowed to bartend anymore. Like that's not a thing. So I knew like me leaving was to start like my new life kind of deal. My new life in Christ, as you could say. And so I put this money down, I secured the apartment. 2 days later, I get a message from my old business coach. I tried to start my own business shortly after my abusive relationship, and it didn't fail, but I just dissolved it because I wasn't in the right mental space to be able to take on something like that at the time. So he had messaged me. I was like, hey, I'm creating a program for people that like want to be online assistant coaches. Mind you, I wanted to be an online coach and I wanted to do influencer stuff, which I had gotten approved for a bunch of influencer content creation stuff very shortly after making this decision as well. So all this stuff was kind of just like lining up. And he messaged me, he's like, yeah, we're like gonna have a selection process. I'm only picking a few people. It's gonna be totally free. And we'll train you and we'll match you with business owners who need coaches. And I'm like, oh, I can like get lined up for a job and like, this is great. I can live wherever I want. Like, I won't have to worry about getting a job there. It's gonna be awesome. So long story short, I get accepted into the program miraculously. So I started like crying, tears of joy, because I'm like, this is so awesome. And I'm going through interviews, and at the time I was like deciding on moving in mid-May. So I got hired on the spot by this one woman, and I told her I was moving in like 3 weeks. And she's like, okay, after that, I'm gonna fly you out to Utah. I'm gonna train you, like all this stuff. I moved down to Charlotte May 11th, 2022. And that Sunday, I was like, okay, I need to go to a church. I went to Elevation Uptown, and I've been there ever since. I also decided to get baptized that summer, right before my 25th birthday, which was really awesome and really sweet. And I was kind of just doing all of those things. And then last year in 2023, I started working with a women's ministry, which has been really awesome. And now I lead my own e-group, and I also am the leader of the connections team. So I kind of did a little bit of back and forth there. Almost like 2 years to the day, full circle, I got in this really awesome opportunity to be a season 5 background extra on season 5 of The Chosen, where I met Audrey, and we went to Salt Lake City, Utah, and that's exactly where I went 2 years before that for my job training and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at today.
Throughout all of that process up until now, how would you say that your relationship with God is like now, and how have you seen that develop throughout all this time?
I would say right now, I've been like looking back on my life, I've always seen God and Jesus as like a friend and also like a savior, because I mean, if you're watching this or listening to this or whatever, like it's literally a 180 story, like literally dead. I say this all the time, like dead in my sin, brought back to life by Jesus, which is so sweet. And I was actually talking about one of my friends, Leslie, the other day, and I was talking about something that I'm kind of struggling with right now, but she had said like, okay, Serena, you think that like you need to look back and remember what God has done for you and shown you that he's loved you. You think that he's not going to still love you and use you now, like when you are following him, when you do know him, like you didn't know him and he still did all that stuff for you. So yeah, I would say it's grown a lot of me like actually recognizing like, oh yeah, like I do have somebody, one, who saved me, but two, cares about me and loves me and protects me and provides for me and is a father figure to me and is like a husband figure to me, even though sometimes it doesn't feel that way for most of those things. Like I feel like mostly it's just felt like a friend and like a savior. So I'm kind of working on developing the rest at this current time. But I know it's only been 2 years, so I know that I'm still very new. I guess I'm still a very baby. So I'm trying to grow up.
Oh, well, do you have any other little tidbit you want to add?
Look back on your life and look back at those pivotal moments of your life and attribute them to God, because 99.9% of the time, that's what it is. I mean, God has been chasing me down my entire life. And it started from, I don't know why I'm getting emotional at the end, but it started from when I was a kid, and just even the smallest thing is like my grandpa reading me those Bible stories. And my mom had sent me pictures of myself, but she sent me a letter that I wrote. And it was like me detailing my Christmas gifts. And I was like 9 years old or something in this letter. And I wrote that I got a cross necklace with a heart around it. And so it's just like, yeah, we weren't religious, but like my family knew, or God knew, that I was gonna be the one to bring my family out of all this stuff. And so just the way that he's like orchestrated himself, just even when I didn't know it was him, like, you know, just remembrance, I think, is the biggest thing of like, okay, you can trace his hand over your life in every single thing, even if you don't think so, like he's there.